Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to another Connecting Scotland webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today's session is on online safety and accessibility, and we're really pleased this morning to be joined by Michael Chamberlain from Lead Scotland, who's going to talk about online safety. Hi Michael. And Hannah Reynolds from Glasgow Disability Alliance, who's going to talk about accessibility. And Hannah's going to be joined by Louise Connor and Jean Collins, who are two of her colleagues who've been doing digital champions work as part of the work that GDA are doing around digital inclusion. There is a chat function within Zoom. If you have questions throughout, feel free to pop them into the chat pane. We will have both our speakers do their input first, and we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to ask Michael and Hannah any questions that you have. So without any further ado, I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to Hannah, first of all, from Glasgow Disability Alliance.
Hi everybody, my name's Hannah. Can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm hearing my voice back at me. Great. Well, I'm Hannah from Glasgow Disability Alliance. We are an organisation run by and for disabled people. We represent over 5,000 disabled members all over Greater Glasgow, and there's a wee blurb there that you were probably emailed just talking about the kind of things that we do to build confidence, get people connected and contributing. Since lockdown has happened from the 16th of March, we stopped all of our usual activities. So prior to this, our kind of bread and butter was bringing together disabled people, hearing their perspectives, amplifying their voices. Since then, obviously, we've made a really real concerted effort to engage with people and understand how COVID has impacted the lives of disabled people. To that extent, we have made over 6,000 calls to check in with people, sent over 20,000 accessible mail outs. This is kind of a sneak preview of the report that will be published tomorrow, so lots more exciting information to come. But the important thing to take from this is that as part of our response, we have adapted really quickly and realised that disabled people are far more isolated than non-disabled people, and that COVID has really supercharged disabled people's experiences. The GDA Connects program has come out of our response to this. You can see in the kind of bottom right there, that part of our response has been understanding the ways that disabled people are left out of these conversations around technology. Some interesting stats, over half of adult non-internet users are disabled, and of non-internet users aged 16 to 24, 60% are disabled. So that's quite kind of a staggering statistic when you think about it. What we've learned from the conversations we've been having with disabled people since lockdown is that 73% are worried about isolation and 80% aren't aware of local services they could access. And obviously, since lockdown, so many of those services have moved online. We've seen lots of mutual aid groups crop up, things like that. But obviously, many disabled people aren't aware of those things happening in their neighbourhood, and that's pretty alarming. We've been involved with the Connecting Scotland pilot, which has seen us distribute 38 Samsung tablets to disabled people all over Glasgow alongside coaching. And our GDA Connects program that I was talking about has seen us purchase 100 iPads and laptops and keyboards and MiFi devices and styluses and all sorts that we are distributing alongside coaching. Some things that we have done as part of the GDA Connects program has been calling people around their digital support needs. So anybody from the back of the survey that indicated they perhaps had technology but didn't feel confident to use it, or maybe they wanted to take part in online learning but they didn't have the technology, we gave them a call to assess their situation, chat about what kind of things they'd like to be doing, their previous technical experiences, and try and tailor a suitable solution for them. So whether that's an iPad, or maybe some people might just have needed an external webcam, or maybe just some coaching on their own devices. We've also developed a program for visually impaired learners with an external specialist, an external VI specialist providing them coaching. Our approach has really been led by the social model of disability, which really frames everything we do at GDA, and that's really understanding that the barriers disabled people face are not caused by their impairment, and finding workarounds together. So that's reasonably straightforward, but somebody who has a visual impairment, like I said, we would tee them up with a VI specialist and make sure that the iPad they receive has the accessibility software engaged so they're able to use gestures and things like that. The digi-coaches that we have aren't IT specialists by any means. They're, I guess, digital natives, you could say, but folk who first and foremost live GDA's values. So we have a person-led approach, very flexible approaches, show a lot of patience and kindness to people, try and build a rapport to really encourage someone to have the confidence to participate in their own learning. There's a quote there actually that's from Jane. My colleagues work with somebody called Paul. I was worried at first I wouldn't be able to learn because of my dyslexia and learning difficulty, but for the first time in my life, someone stuck with me to help me understand instead of just giving up. Now I'm really proud of myself for learning something new, and I can video call my friends while we're all in lockdown. So this individual had a number of challenges and barriers to learning that Jane just kind of rolled with, I guess you could say, and used them to his advantage to be able to learn. I think a large part of what we're doing is actually encouraging people to be learners and reminding them that they are not too disabled to learn, that you can teach an old dog new tricks. Those are some lines that get trotted out to me all the time. And that's something that we're really proud of. So I'm going to pass over now to Louise and Jane, who have been kind of on the front line working with our dozens and dozens of people to get them familiar with their Samsung devices, their iPad devices, their laptops, whatever. So sometimes that's maybe just staying one step ahead of somebody and Googling, right, Amazon Fire, what does that app store look like? So you know what to talk about with that person. But I will just hand over to the two of you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane. As Hannah said, I'm kind of one of the digital team at GDA. So I guess.
And hi, I'm Louise. I'm also.
So I guess me and Louise will just kind of take turns to kind of discuss each point we've got. So basically to understand the barriers faced by those kind of most excluded from online activities, the first thing that we kind of encounter from a lot of people, and this is not everybody, but this is the lack of confidence that can be the biggest barrier. And the way that we've kind of approach this with everyone is kind of building a rapport and building that trust with somebody. So kind of we've quite often found the kind of first phone call that we do with somebody is not about, you know, get the iPad out of the box straight away. It's about kind of speaking to them about, you know, what they want from it, how their life's been affected, what they want to achieve, but also that they can achieve it, and just finding that way of kind of speaking to that individual of, you know, what they can achieve with the device that they've been given. Louise, do you want to come in and say something about the... Oh, I'm not sure whether we've got Louise anymore.
No, I noticed her video had frozen for me.
Okie doke, I'll just keep on going. I guess the other thing is not to assume anything. So the kind of use of the device, a lot of the people we have talked to, some people have had you know, some experience with laptops or computers or smartphones, but some people have also had no experience. You know, they have a house phone in their house and they've never used a device that means that you have to swipe something or press on it, and it's not assuming that the people that we speak to understand what you mean by swipe. So quite often it's describing what is a swipe. You know, it's very easy if you kind of use a smartphone or a tablet on a day-to-day basis, it's very easy to assume, oh, you just swipe that. And even like kind of describing what a swipe is and how you do a swipe is quite important. So never assume, and I think by speaking to people and by building that rapport, you gradually understand what they understand. And I think you then going to get to know whether they do understand kind of swipe, tap, link. So it's even the kind of little things like, oh, just click on that link. Well, What is a link? Oh yeah, so it's like kind of keeping in mind that you might have to kind of discuss what each little thing is that might be kind of second nature to you, but is not necessarily to that person. And I think being like kind of, as Hannah said, we're not IT specialists, and I think that kind of helps a little bit, because it's easier to describe something if you're not an IT specialist, not using too much kind of jargon for everybody. If Louise comes back, Louise, you can just butt in at any time. So the other thing, obviously the massive kind of hurdle that we've had to overcome is doing this over the phone. And obviously once you get to a certain stage, you can do it on Zoom. Once the person has got to the point where they can use video calling, you can do screen share and stuff, it becomes a lot easier. But the initial phone calls, you're doing a lot of kind of tell me what you see, what do you see on the screen, and just kind of talking about, things that they're able to visualize in front. And it might be that somebody reads everything out on the screen they can see, and it's just reassuring them that they're not stupid, that they can't find something. And it's just kind of a lot of reassurance. And I think what we do is kind of say, we're learning this together. This is a new thing, teaching somebody over the phone with a device that I can't see. So a lot of kind of reassurance that, we're in this together, we'll find a way. I might not have the answer, but I'll go and find the answer, and we'll find a way together. So again, kind of touching back on the kind of unfamiliar terminology of things. So that is things like, what's a link, and, what is my, how do people put in a web address, and, what's a cookie? Though this thing's asking me whether I want cookies. I don't know whether I want any cookies. That kind of thing comes up all the time. And you think if you use the internet every day and you're using a device every day, it's kind of second nature. But if something pops up saying you want a cookie, I don't know, maybe I do. So what we've done is, with our user agreement, we've produced like a kind of glossary that people can read through. So it's kind of easy to read, kind of bullet pointed, right? Oh, what's that? Oh, right, that means that. So that's quite a handy thing. And I would recommend that. That's quite a good thing to send out. It's great having everything online and accessible through the device, but if people can't get quite that far, it's good to have a kind of paper version to begin with, to get the kind of ball rolling. Another kind of hurdle that we've had is that people are not really aware. If people are completely unaware of the internet and haven't used it and haven't used a device, a lot of people say, I don't really need it, because they don't understand what is out there. And we have this discussion with people, what if we were able to link you up with technology and a device, what would you do? And some people were like, I don't know, I've got no idea what's out there. So a lot of that is kind of making people aware of what you can do online, and what the internet is, and what YouTube is. A lot of people don't know they need YouTube until they watch 10 dog videos. and quite often, that kind of fun side of it, we've been able to kind of show people, and people weren't even aware it was there. But, if you can kind of find that, and then you've got the kind of more helpful side of the internet, being able to do online shopping and being able to do online banking. But I think to begin with, people might just be like, I don't need that, because it might just be that they're unaware it's there for the taking. A lot of people, the embarrassment of being left behind digitally. So I think we do a lot of online kind of events and like kind of learning. And, for example, we had one member who didn't know how to turn their microphone on, and was too embarrassed to say, I don't know how to do that. So wasn't able to kind of partake in the group. So it's just kind of, again, it's like more reassuring people, and, not to feel stupid to ask something. And it is the kind of, you work on it together, and I do a lot of reassurance. Zoom is quite new to most people in this new kind of lockdown and coming out the other side. Most of us haven't used Zoom, so I kind of encourage, and I'm sure my colleagues do, kind of say, 5 months ago, I'd never been on this either. So it's just to kind of reassure people that it's fine to not know things. But that embarrassment is there for some people, my grandchildren know how to do everything, and I don't know how to do anything. So because we build such a kind of big rapport with people, and having somebody to kind of trust you over the phone, and somebody who you kind of build a relationship with, sometimes difficult situations do arise. It's people are in, more than ever, people are in situations that are truly awful for themselves, mentally or physically, and we found that the emotions are quite high, and whether that's somebody becoming kind of a lot of trust coming your way because you've built up this rapport with somebody. So, or the frustration side of it as well, it is hard to learn over the phone, and people do get frustrated. So you have to kind of make people aware that, there's no pressure. If this gets too much, let's do it tomorrow, or let's do it at a time where people feel like they're in a better space to do it. So that, I think the main emotions we've had are kind of to do with the kind of wider world and what's happening and how people are feeling, but it's also the kind of frustrations of not being able to pick up something quickly, and I'm not really in the right frame of mind at the moment. And I think that's something we kind of lead with when we say, we can help you over the phone, we can do some training. We kind of always put that kind of caveat in. If you're having a bad day and you're not feeling up to it, there's no pressure. We'll just do it on a day you feel good to do it. And it's saying, if you've had enough, some of these conversations, you could be on the phone for an hour and a half with people, and you just have to say, if you get fed up or if you've had enough, just let me know. And there are sometimes people like, right, I've had enough today. We'll leave it at that. So just to be aware that is the kind of emotions that can come up. And again, that kind of links in with the kind of the boundary side of things, because you're building up this huge rapport with people, especially some people who are very, very isolated, and you could be the only person they speak to all week. Is being that friendly voice on the phone and being that person they can rely on to train, but also making sure it's kind of non-dependent relationship. What we've done, there's obviously, as our calls have progressed, there have been people who are in extremely difficult situations and have kind of become dependent on our team. A good tip for that, and you might not be in a similar position, but we're lucky to have, there's 4 members in our team, and for people who become reliant on one person, we've kind of tried to share the coaching as a team, so they get to speak to different people, and there's not so much reliance on one person. Hannah, have you got the next slide there? Okay, so just a few kind of helpful hints and tips for providing the kind of appropriate support. I kind of mentioned beginning of each call, start with a kind of personal. I'm sure most people would do this anyway, but instead of being like, right, get your iPad out the box, we're gonna learn. We all do a bit of like, how are you? How has your week been? How's the grandchildren? And quite often that leads into, oh, you've spoken to your grandchildren on the iPad, that's good, so how are you getting on with it? But just a kind of bit of personal stuff to get going. And at the end of each call, if it's relevant, say, right, when do you want to do this again? Schedule the next one, so the person has got kind of something to work towards. Quite often I'll say, between now and the next call, anything crops up and it's not an immediate, write it, make a note of it, and I can help you with it next time we call. Quite often people are like, oh, I wonder how you do that. A big one, which is sometimes not always easy to do, is having a device that's similar to what your learner is using, or be able to look up online manuals, because as I say, kind of doing this over the phone, it is quite hard, and you're like, right, what screen are you looking at, and what button does that do? So if you've got a similar, I've got an iPhone, it's not an iPad, but quite a lot of the navigation is similar. So having that as a learner, as a kind of a trainer on the other side of the phone is quite handy. Or the online manuals are pretty good as well. Having a hook to learning. So quite often we do the kind of get to know your device, turn it on, turn it off, how to do the video calls so we can get people involved with our learning, online courses. But also at that point, people might get a bit stuck because they don't really know what they want to do. And it's to find that kind of hook, what people really are gonna get people going. And like I said, for example, one of my calls I had, YouTube was a new thing, and I was like, right, this person said they like dogs. I was like, right, let's do YouTube, put into YouTube cute dogs. And the person texted me the next day saying I stayed up until 3:00 watching cute dogs on YouTube. So this is somebody who was completely new to it. So it's finding that hook. Some of the people that I've spoken to are really interested in history. So you can kind of say, oh, have you tried going onto the kind of library website? And it's finding what people are interested in so they can get the most out of that device. There is absolutely no point in being like, I'm going to show you this website because I find it interesting. It's finding what they want to do. And quite a lot of people, it is like just getting the joy out of things, being able to do video calls and watching stuff on YouTube. Oh, and being able to research stuff. Never done that before. So it's finding that hook. A big one, and people are quite rightfully quite worried about online safety. It's something that was brought up a lot, especially with somebody who haven't been on the internet, and you see a lot of stuff on the news and on the media. Online safety is a huge thing, and it's balancing that fear of the internet with the kind of practicalities of online safety, because people are quite rightfully nervous because there is kind of scams out there that people can get drawn into, but it's kind of the practical online safety, passwords and why you should have a strong password, but it's also how is it practical for that person to remember such a strong password. It might be that they write it in a notebook, or if they're good enough they might want a password manager, but it's thinking about how they are able to be. There's a lot of reassurance with online safety, but also reassuring people that they're not stupid to be scared. Actually it's very good to be kind of aware that there are scams out there. So it's kind of that balance is quite a hard one to strike. Don't assume a learner's priorities. So a lot of people are just happy to have a camera. A camera is such a big thing in a device. They might not really want to go online. They might just be like, I can take photographs and share them with people. I think a few of our people, the first thing they wanted to do is get the grandkids' birthdays in the calendar. We're giving them a kind of digital form of something that might be a bit easier for them to use, having a timer, an alarm clock. So kind of really good to ask people what they want to achieve from that, and it might just be reminders, but if you can get them to do that, they get more use out of the device. Calls can take a lot longer than you think. A lot of patience, and you can kind of, as I said, kind of reassure people that if they've had enough, you can kind of call it a day. But we've found even something like setting up an email address for our users takes a long time, and it's just something that we've found. So basically, don't rush people. I would also recommend next time you check in, go over what you've done the last time, because myself, anything I learn, I don't learn it the first time, I learn it 3 times down the line. So I think we found quite often, for example, I've done like sending an email with somebody, and they might put that iPad down and they maybe have looked at it a couple of times through the week, but they haven't sent another email. So, when you restart that call, being like, do you want to try and send another email, and just kind of doing things over and over again definitely helps. Another thing that I sometimes I say, oh, do you want to practice that? Like, feel free to, you've got my email address now, send me a few emails through the week just to get used to it. So those are kind of generally a kind of summary of what we've found so far. Just a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, and making sure that people feel comfortable being on the phone with you. So for the last slide, I think Louise is back and she's going to talk through that one.
Yeah. So that was actually something that we found as well. Not to do so much with the last slide, but that as a digital champion, you can sometimes have problems with the internet, or you can have, you feel like you're maybe not the most tech savvy at all, and that's definitely something that you can use to your advantage, and make it so that it's not you all knowing, imparting your knowledge to the person you're talking to, but often it's when something's not going right with the person that you're helping, for example, it's more like detective work where you're like together looking for clues, trying to work something out. That's just a bit that's what getting locked out of this call made me think of. And then in terms of the accessibility, in terms of the people that you're actually going to reach out to, for us a really important thing was first of all, that all the communications around what we were offering with ALConnect's GDA Connects program was that it was accessible to the most number of people, because if you post about this sort of thing on Facebook, then you're obviously limiting the range of the people you're actually going to reach. And then also for us, because our membership is dealing with a really wide range of accessibility needs, then making sure that our prospective participants know that access options are available, so that when we are making the calls with people to assess whether they could benefit from getting some tech and getting some coaching, that we make it really clear that we've got some different options that we can give to them. For example, people who have visual impairments, then we're able to link them up with a visual impairment specialist, because often people, if you don't mention it explicitly, they will assume that those options are not necessarily there. And then also finding ways to provide special get-togethers for private safer spaces. For example, we've got a LGBT group that we've helped set up regular Zoom meetings, and then we were talking about literacy barriers, but also language barriers can be a big thing, and so finding ways to offer language interpretation, including BSL. And Jane was also talking about one person that she was helping who didn't know about online translation tools. So as you can imagine, that can make introducing someone to that can make a massive difference to how much they can actually engage with their device and with the internet. And then there's also a lot of material online about with tools to help with low literacy, to help with dyslexia and visual impairments. But obviously, if you don't already have access to those tools, it can be hard to actually access them. That's the whole irony of it. So if you're able yourself to find as many resources as possible and then direct them to the people that you're helping, that can make a massive difference as well. And then again, back to the literacy barriers. Just finding creative ways to describe things. You'll find that different people will kind of perceive what's happening on a screen in different ways. So some people will maybe want to describe icons in a specific way that's maybe a little not what you would have imagined the icon represents to you. So just really being tuned into the person you're helping and adapting to them as well. And then accessibility settings. So before we give out the devices, we've got quite massive chunk of work, which is actually setting up all of the devices based on any accessibility needs that each person has. So yeah, that takes a conversation ahead of time with each person, and then setting up all of that, and also for us it's meant actually installing some apps ahead of time that we know people will be using quite a lot. So for example, obviously Zoom has been a big one. Also something that we had to consider was once we started giving out iPads, we had to create Apple IDs for each individual iPad, which took a big amount of time, but it was really necessary that each person, once they receive their device, they can just swipe it open and be able to just start in that way, because there's a lot of there's a lot of steps in setting up a device that can be a big deterrent if it's the first thing that you come against when you're engaging with a device. And then yeah, I think that's me for this slide.
Yep, that's us done. Thank you so much, Jane and Louise. Turns out we had a lot more tips and tricks than we thought we did. Yeah, just to elaborate on what Louise has said there, we have gone through a really comprehensive process of setting up the devices. So like Louise said, when somebody receives the device, they're absolutely good to go. They can unlock it and they can be downloading apps, they can be Zooming straight away, and they can be joining our learning program, importantly, if there's classes they want to be taking part in. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Louise. That was really interesting and really good to get a kind of first-hand perspective on actually delivering digital champion support as well, and some of those challenges and solutions that you guys have come up with. We'll do questions at the end, but for now I'm just going to hand directly over to Michael from Lead Scotland. Thank you, Michael.
Hi there. I'm just going to get my presentation sharing with everyone. Just give me a wave if you can see that. Fantastic. That's what we like to see. So yes, as Aaron said, my name's Michael. I work with Lead Scotland, and I predominantly work delivering training on how to make digital resources more accessible for disabled people. And this really comes from knowing that far from democratizing community engagement or access to online and offline services or learning or commerce or anything like that, the digital revolution has really actually further isolated disabled people, carers, and anyone with multiple barriers, to engaging in learning. So my part of the talk is going to be covering some of the basics of password security, and that's something which Jane was touching on a second ago. As she mentioned, it's a topic which lots of people are really concerned about. So we're going to have a bit of a look at how we can, try and resolve this concern, and also how we can, use this to support and empower people to take steps towards digital confidence and some sort of digital independence as well. I think this is a really important thing, because the usual security advice regarding passwords and regarding online security in general, but the usual security advice can create some barriers for disabled people and also for people with low IT skills in general. So it's looking at how we can reduce or remove those barriers while still making sure everyone's nice and safe online. So passwords. Passwords are everywhere, and I'm sure everyone knows what a password is, but obviously you need them for accessing your email, banking, Amazon, and so on. The point of passwords, I think there's 3 points really. They keep potentially sensitive data safe, and they also allow you to access services and records of how you've interacted with services, and verify your identity online. So they confirm that you're you online is the really important bit. So how can we use passwords to keep ourselves safe online? Well, there are two aspects of password security that work together, and it's probably not going to come as a surprise to anyone. You need to have a strong password and a unique password. One of the reasons that this is so important, according to digital security company Verizon, approximately 2 out of every 3 data breaches or hacking incidents occur or involves a weak or reused password. So we could, in theory, reduce the number of problems that people have by about 2/3 by getting password security right. So it's really important to do it, and it is really easy to do as well. So just looking at this in a little bit more detail, Strong passwords are passwords that are difficult to guess. It's sort of as simple as that. It's tempting to think that hackers are sat there, in a dark room trying to guess your password one attempt after another. Password 1, no, password 2, no, and so on. But sadly, it's much more advanced than that. So using software on just a standard desktop computer, so perhaps what some of you are sat behind at the moment, hackers can use software that easily surpasses 2.8 billion guesses per second in something called a brute force attack. So that's one of the things which we're really concerned about avoiding. Thankfully, keeping ourselves one step ahead of that is really straightforward. So there are 6 things to consider when creating a password. The first 4 things won't come as a surprise to anyone. So that's having uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters, and just having a mix of them is ideal. The next thing to consider is the length of your password. So passwords should be at least 9 characters long, but the longer it is, the safer it is. Many passwords have a minimum length of 8 characters, but using a brute force attack, an 8 character password would be cracked in just over 9 hours. So in I think 9 hours, 6 minutes, your computer could have gone through every possible combination of 8 characters and they would have cracked your password. But if you add 1 more character to make it 9 characters long, it would take about 4.5 weeks. If you add a further character to make it 10 characters long, it would take about 6 years to go through every combination. And the final thing, and I wish I could find a better word for it, is unobviousness. Don't use things that are easily guessed, like special dates or names or places or anything like that. So for example, Michael1 with an exclamation mark at the end, for me is a really weak password because despite the fact it complies with all of the other rules, it's very easily guessed. However, strong passwords are half the battle. The other half of it is to use unique passwords. Now, a unique password is a password that's only used once and it's not used across multiple accounts. Using unique passwords means that if an account is compromised, hackers can't access your other accounts. The average internet user has over 200 online accounts, and I think for anyone who's grown up with the internet as part of their life, that it's going to be, so much more than that. 200 accounts seems quite a small number, really. But this shows the importance of having a unique password. If you use the same password for everything you do online, then you'd be giving a hacker, absolutely unfettered access to your life. So now we know what goes into a password. How do we actually make them? Well, there's 2 solutions to making passwords. As far as I can sort of see, there's a high-tech one and a low-tech one. We'll have a look at the high-tech one first, and this is something which Jane touched on as well. So password generation is the high-tech solution to making passwords, and it is the most secure thing you can do, really. Password generators are just pieces of software which create strong, unique passwords. So for example, here are a couple which I created on a password generator, and as you can see, they're just sort of letter salad. There is just a random jumble of stuff. That's fine. That's in fact, perfect from a security point of view. But anyone with, dyslexia, low literacy skills, any sort of learning impairment could find that very difficult to read and rewrite. And obviously, the point of a password is you can read and rewrite it. So from an accessibility point of view, the security advice there's not especially good. Thankfully, there are ways which we can make passwords in a more accessible way. And I think the best solution to this is to use a memorable short phrase or collection of words as a password. So for example, you could have something like Keith Elgin Forrest 15% or the Jungle Book 88 asterisk. Now the benefit of these is that they're strong, and you can change the format to be personally meaningful really easily. So for that first example, Keith Elgin Forrest 15%, those are the first 3 stations heading north from Huntley. But 3 points on a journey can be tailored to anyone. So that could be your weekly trip to the bank or to Tesco's, or to the chemist's or something. 3 memorable points on that. If you start each word with a capital letter, camel casing, then that's fantastic. You've got a good mix of uppercase and lowercase letters there. And then to ensure that you meet all the requirements of creating a strong password, I would always recommend adding a number or two and a special character at the end. And this means that you've covered absolutely everything you need to do to make a nice strong password. It's easily memorable. In terms of making sure that it is nice and memorable, I would always recommend using the special character on the number that you've last used. So Keith Elgin Forrest 1, 5, and then it's a percentage sign. And if you look at your keyboard, you can see the percentage sign is on the 5. So it just helps reduce any extra remembering that anyone has to do when creating a password like this. But however you choose to create your passwords, there's still an issue. How are you supposed to remember 200 passwords like this? And I think the best way of doing this is to use a password safe or a password manager. Now, password safes are software that allow you to add account details such as usernames and passwords. They're password protected, so they keep all your passwords safe in the event of a hacker gaining access to your computer. As Jane mentioned, this is fantastic for someone who's a bit more confident using technology. If someone's very unsure or doesn't have much skill with IT, then this is going to perhaps be a little bit out of reach, and we'll talk about what you can do for that in a second. But this is the sort of ideal, and if people can use it, this is fantastic for sort of joining security to accessibility. The other way of keeping passwords safe is to write them down on a piece of paper and keep them safe. So if using a password safe was perhaps a little bit out of anyone's comfort zone at the moment, then writing something down on a piece of paper and keeping it nice and safe is the best thing to do. It's much, I know it seems like a daft thing, like writing your PIN down and keeping it in your wallet or something like that, but it's much, much better to risk your accounts being compromised with written down passwords in a secure piece of paper somewhere than it would be to create a weak, non-unique password to begin with. So for your PIN, don't write your PIN number down and keep it next to it if you can. But for passwords, you're probably all right because you're much more likely to come into trouble if all 200 accounts you have online have password 1 as the password than if you've got good, secure, robust, unique passwords for everything and they're written down and kept, somewhere secure. But as I said, password safes are the best sort of thing to use if people can. The benefit really is that you only need to remember the one password to access the database that you've created. This, of course, needs to be strong and unique, but if you go down the route of using 3 memorable points on a journey and a number and a special character, then that should be well within everyone's reach, even if that's written down. They also mean that you can use a password generator or whatever to generate a password, and then you can copy and paste this into a password safe and copy and paste it from there when you next need to use it. And this means that anyone who would struggle reading or rewriting a generated password doesn't have to worry about that because you can just copy and paste it. Now, password safes, I appreciate, can seem a little bit daunting, especially for anyone who's not used technology very much. However, they're not as scary as they seem. Many of us will have encountered basic password safes in some form in our day-to-day lives. For example, every time you log into something and you've used the Remember Me function, you're using a password safe. It's just one which you can't access. You can't update it. You're relying on whatever the software behind that is to do it. So for Tesco's, for example, it comes up with enter your username and email address and password. For me, I click on it and then it comes up with my login details. Anyone who uses Google Chrome or Google more generally and has a Google account has probably come into contact with Google's auto sign-in, and that remembers usernames and passwords and automatically enters them into login boxes. It can also save your card details, so all you need to do is enter the security code on the back of your card. So those are 2 ways which people, will almost certainly have come into contact with password safes in some form or another. The problem with these, and there are a couple of issues with these, is that I think they're slanted a bit too much towards accessibility over security. The first issue is that clicking Remember Me isn't transferable between computers. So if you do your Tesco order at home, you're in town, you think, oh, I've forgotten to put some jam or something in there, I'll nip into the library. You can't use the Remember Me function there. So you still have to try and remember your password somehow. And the Auto sign in from Google is a bit better. If you log into your Google account, it will transfer all your passwords across to a different computer. So that's good. You just need to remember to log out when you're done. The bigger problem is, as I said, it's slanted, I think, a bit too much towards the accessibility side of it. It's not very safe to have passwords and usernames saved in the login box of your computer. So if malware's been installed in your computer, perhaps through following a link in a scam email, then depending what it is, hackers could easily access accounts by, essentially remotely clicking the login button, because the passwords and usernames are all saved there without any sort of extra security step. And also, if you leave your computer unattended, someone could just walk up and access anything that you've got with a password and username saved. So as such, I would ideally recommend using a proper built-for-purpose password safe. One example of something like this is KeePass.info, and it's really highly recommended. I use it as well, so it's, if that counts for anything, and it probably doesn't. But KeePass is a free open source password manager, and that helps people manage their passwords in a secure way. You can store all your passwords in one database, and that's locked with a master password, so you only have to remember that one to unlock the whole database. It's really heavily encrypted and secured, so it's not going to be broken into by anyone either. It features a password generator, so you can create strong, unique passwords with ease and then just copy and paste them into your database. The 3 memorable points on a journey is fantastic for 1 or 2 passwords, but after 10 passwords, 20 passwords, you're going to be starting to run out of memorable points on your journeys. So having something which you can just generate a password you don't have to do anything with is really good for password security, because it stops things becoming a bit obvious, as they will after 10 or 20. KeePass is also fantastic because it's very portable. You can download it on your phone and sync it with the safe on your computer. So whenever you update a password on one, it's updated on another. You can also save the database to a USB and transfer this between computers, and it can just run off the USB as well. So you don't require any extra download to do this, but it means that you can take your password safe to the library or to work, and that's what I do. So I've got all my passwords saved on the USB. If I get to another computer for whatever reason, I can plug it in. My passwords are all there. It doesn't require anything or any extra know-how. However, there are plenty of other password safes available, many of which are free. KeePass is. You don't need to spend money on making sure that your passwords are secure. But the final point I would make is about antivirus software and password safes. Everyone should have antivirus software on any device that they connect to the internet. It protects your device from all sorts of problems without you ever needing to worry about them. If you have antivirus software already, fantastic. Have a check, because it probably comes with a password safe. Most packages do. And I don't know whether the stuff from GDA comes with antivirus. I sort of assume it probably does. So that should all be on there. For people just using things more generally, if you don't have antivirus software, go out and get yourself some. It's well worth it, and it can be very, very cheap. As I said, lots of packages come with password safes integrated. So 3 of the best ones that you can get from Kaspersky, Bitdefender, and Norton. At the moment, there seems to be a sale on all of them, and quite often it's a bit like DFS. They've always got a sale on in some kind. So at the moment, you can cover a PC for a year for 20 quid from Kaspersky. That has loads and loads and loads of extra functions. So there's cloud backup. There's like parental control to keep kids safe online, and there's some secure image storage as well, which is brilliant. Bitdefender is the cheapest of the 3 normally. It doesn't have a sale on at the moment, so it's not, but it provides the best protection against viruses from any of the major antivirus software, and it also has the lowest impact on your computer's performance, so it's fantastic to be really secure whilst not affecting anything. And Norton, I think for 25 quid at the moment, sorry, allows you to cover a computer for the whole year, and for any of these you can pay only a little bit more and do 5 or 10 computers, and that also comes with loads of extras like the parental control and cloud backups that I was talking about for Kaspersky. So wrapping everything up, password security: create a strong, unique password for each online account you have. Use a password generator or create your own with 3 words and a number and special character. Keep them in a password safe which does the remembering for you if possible. You don't need to pay for a password safe, but if you haven't got antivirus software on your device, probably best do that. and you can get a password safe included in that when you install it. And that is sort of the end of my talk, so I'm going to pass it back over to Aaron now. Am I? Yes, I am.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. It was really interesting. I think just as a personal reflection, your input around password safety and that balance between creating a secure password, but also a password that's actually accessible in terms of being able to remember it, and the best way to create that. So I found that really useful. So thank you for your input. Going to hand over now to anyone that has any questions. If you'd like to ask either Hannah, Louise and Jane or Michael anything based on their input today, you can either pop it into the chat pane or put your hand up or use the emoji to signal you've got a question, and then we'll call on you to unmute yourself and ask a question. Grace.
Hi, I was going to ask about the setting up the iPad and what you'd set up, because you mentioned about setting up the iCloud, and also downloading kind of key apps like Zoom. Yeah, and some of the accessibility settings. It's quite good to know what you. I think that's definitely been a barrier that I've noticed as well. So I think it's quite good to hear what you guys set up.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to answer that. Hi, Grace. Thanks for your question. Yeah, a really good point. So basically, we went through a demo and took an iPad out of the cellophane and out of the box and went to see how many steps it would be for an end user to get to a point where they were ready to go. And we basically lost count at 30. It's so many tiny details that you need to input that for an absolute first-time user would probably be overwhelming and really put somebody off trying. So we have set up the devices with that person's access requirements. So that might be large font, or for a visually impaired person, we've turned on the voice assist and the gestures. But for all the devices, we set up an Apple ID, and that was so somebody could download apps immediately. The Apple ID is actually quite a sophisticated thing to set up in that it requires two-step verification. So you need to have an email address and a mobile number. So we had to set up an email address for each person, which normally we would not do. We would always try and give somebody the skills to start their own email address rather than saying, here's your address and password. So we've made a generic email address that's unique to each person, GDA iPad 001 to 100, and that is automatically logged in on the Mail app on the device. And we're really clear to people that they don't have to keep that they can log out of it, or they can also add another email address they have. They could download the Yahoo app or the Outlook or Gmail app and set up their own account as well. But for an absolute beginner, they have an email address that's logged in alongside that Apple ID and the Zoom app downloaded, so they can effectively be in a GDA learning class in as few as 3 clicks. They could go Mail app, open that new email and click on the link in it, and it would automatically open in the Gmail app. We want people to be able to take part in our courses without too many barriers. So that's what we've done. Again, people don't need to keep that email address. They don't need to be sending personal emails from it, because again, it is kind of a generic GDA iPad one, but it's just one that from the get-go, they can hit the ground running and they can take part in creative writing, yoga, seated exercise, arts and crafts, without having to have all the kind of hurdles that come with setting up an email address, which might just feel a bit overwhelming to somebody, and we can work on those kind of things later. So that's been a really big process for us, is setting up all those email addresses and trying to remind Gmail that we're not some kind of spam bot that's wanting to create dozens and dozens, because it keeps kind of locking us out. And we've had to buy different SIMs because there's only so many SIMs you can allocate to a certain number of emails, and that kind of stuff. But it's been absolutely worth it for us to know that people can hit the ground running, because even though iPads, we consider them to be more accessible than Samsung devices, they're accessible once they're set up. Certainly from the get-go, from that first turn on, there are so many hurdles and decisions that need to be made that for someone who's not a digital native, they'd probably just put it down and watch the telly. You know, it's tricky. But I'm happy to chat with you more about that, Grace. If you want to have a Zoom later or exchange some emails, we could do that.
Oh yeah, that would be brilliant, because yeah, that's what I'd found. I got so far with setting it up, but then I was asking the person to do the rest, and I think it's just become too overwhelming. So it's really good to hear what you're saying. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah.
I just saw a question on the chat about was it about using team TeamViewer. I don't know the second one, Zoho Assist, but we did consider using TeamViewer at some point. But something that we found was that often when you're at the point where maybe someone's is a complete beginner and you kind of have to break down everything that they're seeing, and so seeing their screen would be really useful. Actually, setting up an app such as TeamViewer, it has quite a few steps that you have to do that would be a barrier in itself. So the solution that we found in the end was just actually having a device that is either identical to the one the person has, which for us was possible to do because we had the Samsung devices from the No One Left Behind pilot, or just pairing up, making sure that people, if you're really familiar with Android devices, even through your phone, then that we found was more useful than actually screen sharing apps. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and once someone becomes a bit more advanced, you can always get them to screen share on Zoom with you.
Yeah,
well.
It was me who asked that question actually. I work for a charity called LEAP that works primarily with older people. So as part of Connecting Scotland, we're getting, I think it's 90 iPads and 10 Chromebooks. And I think just kind of touching on what you've already said about setting up the iPads before people get them, I think as part of that we were considering putting TeamViewer on it just in case, because we were also wondering about further down the line, like actually doing sort of almost like remote IT classes for people when they've got to grips with the basics, like actually starting to do things in a group setting. So we thought it might be useful for that, maybe further down the line. But I do take your point about like the steps that are needed to get to the point of setting up TeamViewer and things. So no, that was useful. Thank you.
We've also
Yeah, I would probably also just encourage if you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, apologies. We've also thought about doing a kind of, once people get to a certain level, about doing like a kind of online class that we base around, anybody who wants to, and we were thinking start at kind of online safety and do our own kind of online safety class that people can join. So once they get to a certain level, they can engage in Zoom. We've thought about doing the same thing. I think we're in the middle of setting it up, that kind of having those classes for people who've got the device, and they can all kind of learn together. Certainly in terms of time, the use of time, I think that would be a lot better, being able to speak to a group that are a certain level, as opposed to individuals where you kind of saying you're getting the same message across.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to add that if you are going to add TeamViewer or another program that enables you to access their screen, that you give them a lot of information about what that entails, because when we distributed the devices, people were really concerned that we could see what they're doing, and we were very, very clear that as long as whatever they were doing was safe and legal, they could do whatever they wanted, and we couldn't see any photographs they took, we couldn't see which apps they downloaded, we couldn't see how long they spent on the devices, and they were absolutely free to use it as they pleased. So I'd just be mindful that potentially installing something like that, people might feel a bit reluctant to engage with it because they might feel they're being monitored.
I think it's one of those things though that we'd be really clear with them that we would never be able to access it without them being on their device with us. So like if they were on their device and they weren't getting a phone call to go through stuff, then we wouldn't be able to access TeamViewer, because I think they have to put in a code or something. So it would only be like obviously with their consent and during like tuition if it was needed. It wouldn't be any other point.
Definitely.
I think we do need to make that absolutely clear to people from the off that it's their device, and what they do with it, we don't know. It's up to them what they're kind of looking at and stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. I've just seen a question from Kath about supporting folk with disabilities with credit card usage / online shopping. That's a really, really good point, and we have had some concerns about that too. So we will support people to do whatever they want to do, as we said. So we wouldn't kind of tell them that online shopping is something and they have to do, because people might have other solutions to that. But if that's something they want to learn how to do, we will, and we will talk to them about online safety and credit card safety. We never take their number, their details, so we do not want access to any of their personal financial information, and we're really clear about that. I think the challenge is also that people are quite wary of putting their credit card details into anything. So actually, oftentimes you're having to say to people, the Tesco app is probably safe, the Asda app is probably safe. but I think, as Jane and Louise mentioned, it is natural for people to be cautious about that. People hear all these horror stories about having their identity stolen and having their bank accounts emptied. So they are really scared about engaging with something like that, even though it does offer a lot of convenience to them. So yeah, we would definitely proceed with caution for anything where somebody would be entering their bank account details. We would want to make sure they had downloaded the correct app, the genuine app, and that they knew how much they were going to be charged. I think, Jane, you've probably got an example of someone who accidentally signed up to something on the back of an Asda order.
Yeah, it was one of these things on Asda where I think it was like linked, and it wasn't dodgy as per. It was kind of one of these kind of 3 thing, like a free trial, but then turned into a pay monthly thing. But it was just, somebody thought, I can't remember what it was. It was like getting a discount from your Asda shop. So it was like a coupon that you got some money off, and they signed up to it. But what they didn't realize what they were signing up for was a monthly thing. And it's just to make people aware of, I think, making people aware of these kind of things that are out there. You know, if something is going to be free, there might be a reason why it's initially free, and making that really clear to people, like, if something looks too good to be true, further investigation is required. And I think there's been a few times where, and luckily this gentleman who accidentally signed up to this thing, he realized, he was like, I've signed up to something that's going to come out of my bank monthly, and he was able to rectify it. But I think just kind of making people aware of, like, if somebody says they're going to get a free iPad or a free phone,
unless it's from GDA, or, like, you know, they've won a competition, but they have to put in their details to release the prize. I think it's just making people aware of, like, if it looks too good to be true, you know, if you're worried about it, share it with somebody who's got a bit more technology knowledge, or, you know, always kind of keep your eyes peeled for that kind of thing, because they are out there, and it would be unfair to say they weren't. So it's just making people aware of those things before they kind of take the next step.
Thanks for that, Jane. Really good point. I'm conscious we're over by a few minutes now, and a few people have had to go on with other commitments and meetings. Any final questions, any burning questions anyone else wants to ask before we wrap up? I'm just scrolling through. I don't think I see any hands up. Perfect. Thank you all for coming along to the session. Huge thanks to Hannah, Louise and Jane from Glasgow Disability Alliance, and to Michael from Lead Scotland for their input. I think it was really incredibly valuable. I really appreciate your input, so thank you so much. And that's the end of this session. We'll have some more, another one next Tuesday on online safety and at socialising safely online. And we've got a few in the pipeline with RNIB, specifically around using Chromebooks and iPads for people with sight loss. So we'll share the details of those in due course. But for now, thank you all for joining us.